A puppy keeps crying after its owner passed away, until the vet reads its collar and breaks down in tears. Everyone thought it was just grief, but this dog wasn't mourning. It was trying to tell him something. The collar hides a message that changes everything, one that ties the vet to the woman who died and to secrets buried deep in the past. As he digs for the truth, he realizes the animal isn't just a pet. It's a messenger, trained for something far more dangerous. Shadows close in. People start showing up who shouldn't know about the dog at all. What was the owner running from? And when the truth inside that collar finally comes to light, will it save him or destroy what's left of his life? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Rain drummed against the windows of Pine Trace Veterinary as emergency lights flashed through the evening gloom. Dr. Calder Wynne looked up from his paperwork at the sound of urgent voices in the waiting room. His practiced calm wavered at the sight of two paramedics guiding a trembling German shepherd through the door. "Found him with his owner at Miller's Grove," the first responder said, water dripping from his uniform. "She collapsed on the trail. We couldn't save her, but the dog wouldn't leave her side. Your clinic was listed on the tags." The shepherd's amber eyes locked onto Calder. Despite the pup's obvious distress, there was something eerily focused in that gaze. Calder crouched down, keeping his movements slow and steady. "Let's take a look at you, boy," he said softly. The dog padded forward, but instead of allowing an exam, it began pawing frantically at its collar, whining with increasing urgency. "He's been doing that since we found them," the second paramedic noted. "Won't settle down?" Romy Black, Calder's veterinary technician, appeared with a towel. "Poor thing's soaked through. Here, let me help." But the shepherd wouldn't let her near the collar, turning instead to Calder with another insistent whine. Something about the dog's behavior made the hair on Calder's neck stand up. This wasn't normal distress. "All right, let's see what's bothering you," he murmured, reaching for the collar. The tag glinted under the fluorescent lights as he turned it over. The words punched the air from his lungs. "Bismarck, if I'm gone, take him to Dr. Calder Wynne. Forgive me, son. I'm keen." The metal tag grew slippery in his suddenly numb fingers. Am Keen, Marta Keen, his mother. "Dr. Wynne." Romy's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay? You've gone white as a sheet." The room tilted slightly. Calder gripped the edge of the reception desk, his professional mask cracking. The woman who had walked out of his life 20 years ago was dead. And she had sent him her dog. "I need—" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I need the incident report." The paramedics exchanged glances before the first one spoke. "Found her on the East Trail around 5:30. No ID except a library card. Apparent heart attack, but the medical examiner will determine cause of death. Dog was protecting her body when we arrived." Calder nodded mechanically, his training taking over where his emotions threatened to collapse. "I'll need copies of everything for our records. The dog, Bismarck, he's evidence now." "Evidence?" Romy asked. "The deceased was my mother." The words felt like ground glass in his throat. "And this wasn't a coincidence. She meant for him to find me." The German shepherd, Bismarck, pressed against Calder's legs, his earlier frenzy replaced by watchful attention. When Calder whistled softly in thought, the dog's ears pricked forward with startling precision. "Romy, get me the intake forms. We need to document everything." His hands were shaking as he carefully removed the collar. "This needs to be secured, and we need a full exam on Bismarck." The next hour passed in a blur of protocols and paperwork. Calder's medical training provided a shield against the emotional storm brewing inside him. He noted Bismarck's unusual responsiveness to certain sounds, the way the dog tracked his movements with military focus. This was no ordinary companion animal. As the last light faded outside and the paramedics left with their paperwork, Calder found himself staring at the locked drawer containing Bismarck's collar. 20 years of silence, and now this. A dead woman's last message, a dog with secrets in his training, and the word that haunted him most: son. "You need to sit down," Romy said firmly, pushing a cup of coffee into his hands. "Your hands are shaking so bad you can barely hold the pen." "I'm fine." "You are not fine. Your mother just died." "The woman who abandoned me just died," he corrected sharply. "There's a difference." Romy's warm brown eyes held his, unflinching. "Maybe there is. But she sent you that dog for a reason. Instead of charging ahead with procedures, maybe you should stop and think about what she was trying to tell you." A whine from the doorway drew their attention. Bismarck stood there, his gaze fixed on Calder with an intensity that seemed to carry the weight of his mother's last wishes. The dog had already chosen him, that much was clear. But why? What had Marta Keene set in motion with her final act? The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as Calder stared back at the shepherd, feeling the careful walls he'd built around his past begin to crack. His mother had asked for forgiveness, but the mystery of why she'd needed it, and why she'd chosen this moment to reach out through her dog, loomed like a shadow in the gathering dark. "I need to think," he said finally. "No," Romy countered, her voice gentle but firm. "You need to feel. Your mother loved you enough to make sure her dog found you. Whatever happened in the past, that has to mean something." Bismarck patted over and rested his head on Calder's knee, as if emphasizing Romy's words. Looking down into those intelligent eyes, Calder felt something shift inside him. A hairline fracture in the protective shell he'd wrapped around his heart. The shepherd's fur was still damp under his fingers as he absently stroked the dog's head. Each breath seemed to carry the weight of unspoken words, of years of questions that might never find answers. His mother was gone, taking her explanations with her. All she'd left behind was this dog and a plea for forgiveness. For the first time in 20 years, Dr. Calder Wynne allowed himself to feel the full force of his loss, not just the fresh wound of her death, but the old, scarred pain of her leaving. And through it all, Bismarck remained steadfast beside him, a living bridge between the mother he'd lost and the truth she'd died trying to tell him. The clinic's lights hummed softly overhead as the night deepened, and somewhere in the darkness, secrets waited to be uncovered. But for now, there was only this: a man, a dog, and the beginning of a journey neither of them had chosen, but both were destined to take. Calder paced the examination room, his footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to Bismarck, who sat watching him with unwavering attention. The shepherd's presence was a constant reminder of the choice he now faced. "I know a good rescue in Cedar Mills," he said finally, running a hand through his dark hair. "They specialize in German shepherds. They could find him a home." "You can't be serious." Romy's voice cut through his practiced detachment. She stood with her arms crossed, her auburn hair falling loose from its earlier neat bun. "Your mother specifically wanted Bismarck to come to you. Not a rescue, not another family, you. I'm a vet, not a dog owner. My schedule is impossible. My apartment doesn't allow pets, and you're scared," Romy finished softly. "Scared of what keeping him might mean." Before Calder could respond, the clinic's front door chimed. Heavy footsteps echoed through the waiting area, followed by the sharp tap of high heels on tile. A woman's voice called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Calder stepped into the hallway and found himself facing two people. The woman was slender and expensively dressed, her pale eyes scanning the clinic with barely concealed impatience. Behind her loomed a tall man in worn work boots and a heavy jacket that smelled of smoke and engine oil. "Dr. Wynne?" The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Sable Keene, Marta's niece. This is Gideon Rusk, my aunt's landlord. We're here about her dog." Calder's spine stiffened at the proprietary tone in her voice. "The dog was brought here by first responders after your aunt's death. He's currently under observation." "Yes, such a tragedy." Sable's words carried rehearsed sympathy. "But we're here to collect any of Aunt Marta's property. That came with him. The collar, any paperwork. Family property should stay with family, don't you agree?" From the back room, Bismarck began to whine. The sound rose in pitch when Sable took a step forward. "The collar and documentation are part of an ongoing investigation," Calder said firmly. "I can't release them." Gideon Rusk shifted his weight, boots creaking. "Look, Doc, we're just trying to handle things proper-like. That dog and everything with him belonged to Marta Keene. Her niece here is next of kin." "Actually," Romy spoke up from behind Calder, "Marta Keene left specific instructions for Bismarck to be brought to Dr. Wynne. We have that in writing." Sable's polite mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. "Nevertheless, as her closest living relative, I'm her son." The words left Calder's mouth before he could stop them. "So, technically, I'm her closest living relative." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sable's perfectly manicured nails dug into her designer handbag. "Aunt Marta never mentioned a son. Funny, she never mentioned a niece either." Calder moved toward the back room, where Bismarck's cries had grown more insistent. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a patient to attend to." "This isn't over," Rusk called after him. "That dog ain't yours to keep." Calder found Bismarck pacing anxiously in the exam room. The shepherd's demeanor changed instantly when Calder entered, pressing against his legs as if seeking to protect him. It was only when Calder positioned himself between the dog and the door that Bismarck's whining subsided. Through the wall, he could hear Romy firmly but politely showing their unwanted visitors out. When she returned, her face was troubled. "Well, that was weird," she said, closing the door behind her. "Did you see how Bismarck reacted when Sable got close? Almost like he was afraid of her. Or warning me about her." Calder knelt beside the shepherd, examining the collar he'd removed earlier. Why would they be so interested in a simple leather collar? Romy leaned in closer, her fingers tracing the worn material. "Wait, what's this?" She pointed to a barely visible irregularity in the lining. "There's a tiny flap here, stitched into the leather." Calder retrieved a pair of surgical scissors and carefully snipped the nearly invisible threads. A small brass key fell into his palm, its surface dulled with age. "She hid this here," he said quietly. "My mother hid this key where only someone doing a thorough examination would find it." He looked up at Romy, and those two were very interested in getting their hands on this collar. "Which means they probably knew about the key," Romy concluded, "or at least suspected something was hidden here." Calder stood, the key clutched tightly in his hand. The weight of it seemed to carry more questions than answers. Why had his mother hidden it? What did it open? And why were Sable and Rusk so eager to claim it? He crossed to the drug cabinet and unlocked it, placing both the key and collar in a secure evidence bag. Whatever secrets his mother had tried to protect, they'd clearly attracted dangerous attention. The professional part of his brain urged caution, documentation, proper procedures. But another part, the part that remembered a little boy waiting for his mother to come home, wondered what she'd been trying to tell him. Bismarck watched him with those intelligent eyes, as if he knew exactly what the key was for but couldn't say. The shepherd's earlier distress had vanished completely now that Sable and Rusk were gone, replaced by the alert watchfulness Calder was beginning to recognize as part of his training. "I'll need to log these as evidence," he said finally, "and make some calls about proper storage until we figure out what's going on." "And Bismarck?" Romy asked softly. Calder looked down at the shepherd, who had positioned himself protectively at his side. His mother had trusted this dog enough to make him a messenger, and now Bismarck's very presence had drawn immediate attention from people who set off warning bells in Calder's mind. "He stays with me," Calder decided, "at least until we understand what's really going on here." He reached down to scratch behind Bismarck's ears, earning a gentle thump of tail against the floor. "My mother may have left me 20 years ago, but she trusted me with him at the end. I won't let her down. Not this time." The evening shadows stretched long across Pine Trace Veterinary's parking lot as Calder finished his last rounds. He'd brought Bismarck back to his modest house on the edge of town, but the German shepherd hadn't settled. For the past hour, the dog had been pacing from the front door to Calder, whining in an odd, rhythmic pattern. "That's not random," Romy said, watching from Calder's worn leather armchair. She'd insisted on staying to help him settle Bismarck in. "Look at how he keeps doing the same movements, the same sounds. It's like he's trying to tell you something." Calder ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion warring with curiosity. Mom was always good with animals. The way Bismarck responds to sounds, how he reacted to Sable and Rusk, he's had serious training. Bismarck let out another series of whines, pawing at the door 3 times before turning to fix Calder with those intelligent amber eyes. "I think," Romy said slowly, "he wants to show you something. Your mom trained him for a reason, right? Maybe this is part of it." The logical part of Calder's brain, the part shaped by years of military precision and veterinary protocols, said to wait until morning. But something in Bismarck's urgent persistence struck a deeper chord. "Get your coat," he told Romy. "If this is what I think it is, I want a witness." The spring night was cool and clear as they followed Bismarck through familiar streets. The shepherd moved with purpose, checking back frequently to ensure they were following. When they turned onto Industrial Avenue, recognition hit Calder like a physical blow. "Storage solutions," he murmured, as Bismarck led them to the gate of a well-maintained storage facility. "Mom used to work just down the street at Midwest Freight." Romy pulled out her phone, its blue light illuminating her face. "Look at this. There's still a unit listed under Marta Keen. Unit 312. They found the unit easily enough, tucked away in a back corner. The brass key from Bismarck's collar fit perfectly in the lock. "Wait," Calder said before opening the door. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Whatever we find in here might be evidence. We need to document everything." The metal door rolled up with a quiet rattle. Bismarck trotted in confidently, heading straight for a stack of plastic storage containers in the corner. The unit was small, but meticulously organized, with labeled boxes lining metal shelves. "Look at this," Romy said, picking up a thick notebook. "It's filled with training notes, specific whistle patterns, behavior cues." She flipped through pages of detailed instructions. "Your mom was teaching Bismarck to respond to coded commands." Calder found a handheld digital recorder in one of the boxes. When he pressed play, his mother's voice filled the small space. April 15th. Confirmed another livestock hauler carrying more than cattle. Voss is using the legitimate shipping manifests as cover, but the weight calculations don't match. I've documented every discrepancy, every unusual route change. Bismarck's training is progressing well. If anything happens to me, he'll know what to do. "Voss," Calder repeated. "Trent Voss? The freight company owner?" "There's more," Romy said, pulling out a stack of ledgers. These are all coded, but look. Shipping dates, weight calculations, route changes. Your mom was building a case against him. Calder's hands trembled slightly as he picked up another notebook. This one was personal, addressed to him. My dearest Calder, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I know you believe I abandoned you, but the truth is more complicated. When I discovered what Voss was doing with the shipping networks, I knew he wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who threatened to expose him. I couldn't risk them using you to get to me, so I disappeared, to protect you, and to gather evidence that would stand up in court. Bismarck is more than just a dog. He's the final piece of my plan. I've trained him to recognize specific patterns, to guide you to the evidence when the time was right. Trust him, son. He'll help you finish what I started. I never stopped loving you. I hope someday you can understand why I had to leave. Love, Mom. The words blurred as Calder blinked back unexpected tears. All these years, he'd carried the weight of abandonment, never knowing his mother had been fighting a silent battle to protect him. This changes everything, Romy said softly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Your mom wasn't running away from you. She was trying to bring down a drug trafficking operation. Bismarck pressed against Calder's legs, offering quiet support. Now that they were here, his earlier urgency had been replaced by calm alertness. He'd done his job, fulfilled his training, just as Marta had planned. We need to document all of this properly, Calder said, his medical training kicking in. Photos, inventory lists, everything. Then we need to figure out who we can trust with this information. He looked down at Bismarck, seeing him with new understanding. Mom trained him to be more than a messenger. She made him a guide to the truth. They spent the next hour carefully photographing and cataloging everything in the storage unit. The evidence painted a clear picture. Trent Voss had been using his legitimate freight business as cover for moving narcotics across state lines. Marta had methodically gathered proof, knowing she'd need an airtight case to bring down someone with Voss's money and connections. Look at these training logs, Romy said, showing Calder another notebook. She spent months teaching Bismarck specific response patterns, the way he was crying at the clinic, the pacing tonight. It wasn't random distress. He was following his training, trying to lead you here. Calder scratched behind Bismarck's ears, earning a soft whine of contentment. She knew I'd examine him thoroughly as a vet. She knew I'd find the key. Everything about this was carefully planned. The weight of 20 years of misunderstanding pressed against his chest. He'd built his life around the belief that his mother had chosen to leave him. The truth was both better and worse. She'd chosen to protect him at the cost of their relationship. We should secure everything properly, Romy said, practical as always. Maybe make copies of the key documents. We don't know who else might know about this place. Calder nodded, his mind already working through the implications. If Sable and Rusk had been so interested in Bismarck's collar, they might know more than they'd let on. And if Voss discovered that Marta's evidence had survived, we'll take what we need tonight, he decided. Then tomorrow we start figuring out who we can trust with this information. He looked at the scattered evidence of his mother's sacrifice and courage. She spent years building this case. The least I can do is make sure it wasn't for nothing. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Pine Trace's main street as Calder guided his truck toward the modest house at the edge of town. Beside him, Romy clutched a canvas bag containing Marta's evidence, while Bismarck sat alert in the back seat, his amber eyes fixed on the road ahead. You're sure about Dodd? Romy asked, her fingers drumming nervously on the bag. I mean, I know he was sheriff, but that was years ago. Calder's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He's the most honest man I know. When I was doing my EMT training, he taught me more about ethics than medicine. If anyone knows how to handle this right, it's him. They pulled up to a neat white house with a well-tended garden. Before Calder could reach for the door, Ephraim Dodd appeared on his front porch. Even in retirement, the former sheriff carried himself with quiet authority, his weathered face creasing into a warm smile as he recognized his visitors. "Doc Wynn," he called out, descending the steps. "Been wondering when you'd show up." Calder stepped out, followed by Romy and Bismarck. "You heard about my mother?" News travels fast in small towns. Dodd's eyes flickered to the bag Romy carried, then to Bismarck. "And some things don't need words to tell their story. Come on inside." The interior of Dodd's house reflected its owner, practical, orderly, with a subtle warmth in the details. He led them to a sturdy kitchen table, gesturing for them to sit while he poured coffee into thick mugs. "Show me what you've got," he said, settling into his chair. One by one, they laid out the evidence: the coded ledgers, the training journals, the handheld recorder, and finally, the letter Marta had written to Calder. Dodd examined each item methodically, his expression growing grimmer with every page he turned. "Your mother," he said finally, "was either the bravest or the most foolish woman I've ever known. Maybe both." He tapped the ledgers. "These shipping records, they're not just about drugs. They're about a whole network of corruption. Voss has his fingers in everything from local politics to judicial appointments." "Can we take this to the district attorney?" Romy asked. Dodd leaned back, his chair creaking. "It's not that simple. Voss owns more than just trucks. He's got influence stretching from here to the state capitol. Some judges, too, the kind who'd be happy to dismiss evidence on technical grounds." "Then what do we do?" Calder's voice held an edge of frustration. "Just let him get away with it?" "No." Dodd's response was immediate and firm. "But we do this smart. First, we document everything. Multiple copies, properly dated and witnessed. We establish a clear chain of custody that can't be disputed. Then we find the right DA, someone with both the courage and the political backing to take on Voss." Bismarck, who had been lying quietly at Calder's feet, suddenly lifted his head and gave a soft whine. Calder absently reached down to scratch his ears, noticing how the dog's eyes never left the evidence spread across the table. "I've still got some contacts in the justice system," Dodd continued. "Let me make some quiet inquiries, find out which DA might be interested in making their reputation on a case like this. Meanwhile, you two need to protect those originals." "We can start copying everything at the clinic," Romy suggested. "We've got the equipment, and it's secure after hours." Calder nodded. "We'll need to document serial numbers, create detailed inventories, make it impossible for anyone to claim we tampered with the evidence." "Good thinking." Dodd stood, moving to a cabinet where he retrieved a small camera. "Use this. It's old school, but digital files can be altered. Film photos, with dated negatives. Those are harder to dispute in court." They spent the next hour outlining a plan. Dodd would reach out to his contacts while Calder and Romy began the painstaking process of duplicating and cataloging every piece of evidence. They would prepare 3 identical packets, one for the DA, one for safekeeping, and one as backup. "Be careful who you trust," Dodd warned as they prepared to leave. "Voss didn't get where he is by being careless. If he suspects what you have—" "We'll be careful," Calder promised. He paused, then added, "Thank you. For believing us. For helping." "Your mother was trying to clean up this town," Dodd replied. "Least we can do is finish what she started." Back at the clinic, Calder and Romy transformed the break room into an evidence processing center. They worked methodically, photographing each document, recording serial numbers, and making precise copies of every page. Bismarck stationed himself near the table, responding to Calder's occasional whistle commands with focused attention. "Look at him," Romy said, watching as Bismarck's ears perked up at another whistle. "Your mom really did think of everything. She trained him to be not just a messenger, but a guardian." Calder paused in his work, studying the German Shepherd. Every movement, every response spoke of careful training. His mother had poured years into preparing this moment, knowing she might not be there to see it through. "I keep thinking about all the time we lost," he said quietly. "All the years I spent being angry at her for leaving." Romy reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "She made an impossible choice, but she never stopped believing in you. This whole plan, it only works because she knew exactly who you are. A healer, someone who pays attention to details, someone who'd do the right thing, even when it's hard." They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, building their case piece by piece. Each document told part of a larger story. Shipping manifests with hidden codes, financial records showing impossible profits, training logs that revealed how Marta had prepared Bismarck for his crucial role. When Dodd called around 2 o'clock, his voice carried a mix of caution and hope. "I might have found our DA," he said. "Young prosecutor out of the state capital, making a name for herself fighting corruption. She's got political backing from people even Voss can't touch." "How soon can we meet her?" Calder asked. "Give me a couple days to arrange it properly. Meanwhile, keep working on those copies. The more organized and documented everything is, the harder it'll be for anyone to dismiss." They ended the call, and Calder looked at their progress. One wall was now covered with precisely labeled copies, each one dated and catalogued. The original sat in sealed envelopes, ready for secure storage. Bismarck dozed nearby, but his ears twitched at every sound, his training evident even in rest. "We're really doing this," Romy said, stepping back to survey their work. "We're going to finish what your mom started." Calder nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. His mother had spent years building this case, knowing the risks, preparing for every contingency. Now it was up to them to see it through. As if sensing his thoughts, Bismarck stood and pressed against his leg, offering silent support. Calder reached down to ruffle his fur, remembering the words from his mother's letter. "Trust him, son. He'll help you finish what I started." Looking at the carefully assembled evidence, at Romy's determined face, at Bismarck's steady presence, Calder felt something shift inside him. The anger and hurt he'd carried for so long was transforming into something else, a determination to honor his mother's courage by bringing the truth to light. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the storage facility's parking lot as Calder and Romy made one final trip to secure the original documents. Bismarck trotted ahead, alert and focused, leading them down the familiar corridor. "Almost done," Romy said, adjusting her grip on the box of evidence. "Just need to lock these away and—" A figure stepped out from behind a storage unit, blocking their path. Gideon Rusk's weathered face twisted into an ugly smile. "Ain't you two worked late enough today?" Calder instinctively moved in front of Romy. "We're just leaving, Rusk." "Now that's where you're wrong." Rusk's hand slipped inside his heavy jacket. "See, there's been a change of plans." The first whiff of smoke reached them before they saw the flames. Orange light flickered beneath a unit door further down the corridor, and dark smoke began seeping through the seams. "Fire!" Romy's voice cracked with alarm. Rusk backed away, his smile never wavering. "Shame about these old buildings, electrical problems, you know how it is." The smoke thickened rapidly, rolling along the ceiling in dark waves. Calder's military training kicked in. Assess, adapt, act. He grabbed Romy's arm and pulled her back the way they'd come, but another orange glow appeared behind them. They were trapped between two growing fires. "Down!" Calder ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. "Stay low, under the smoke!" Bismarck whined, pawing at Calder's leg. The dog's training seemed to be triggering, responding to the emergency. Calder remembered Marta's notes about emergency protocols and whistled a quick pattern. Immediately, Bismarck's posture changed, alert, focused, ready to lead. The smoke was getting thicker, making their eyes water. Calder pulled off his button-down shirt, leaving just his t-shirt. He tore the fabric into strips, handing one to Romy. "Wet it with your water bottle," he instructed, already soaking another strip for Bismarck. "Cover your nose and mouth." His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he secured the makeshift filter over Bismarck's muzzle, the dog staying perfectly still despite the chaos. The heat was building, and warning creaks echoed through the metal building. They needed to move fast. Calder pulled out Marta's notebook, squinting through the haze at her meticulous notes. There, a mark indicating a maintenance exit, added in her precise handwriting. "This way." He grabbed Romy's hand, clutching the evidence box under his other arm. "Stay low and follow Bismarck." The German shepherd moved with purpose, leading them through the thickening smoke. The heat pressed down on them like a physical weight, and somewhere in the building, something exploded with a deep boom that shook the floor. They reached the side corridor Marta had marked, but the smoke was so dense they could barely see 3 feet ahead. Romy stumbled, coughing violently despite the wet cloth. Calder wrapped an arm around her waist, half carrying her as they pressed forward. Bismarck stopped at a metal door, pawing at its base. This was it. Their way out. Calder handed the evidence box to Romy and threw his weight against the door. It didn't budge. "Come on!" He slammed against it again, feeling the metal grow hot under his hands. The third impact sent pain shooting through his shoulder, but the door groaned and gave way slightly. One more try. The explosion of fresh air nearly knocked them over as the door finally burst open. They stumbled out into the evening air, gasping and coughing. They'd made it maybe 20 feet when Romy's legs buckled. "Romy!" Calder caught her before she hit the ground. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. Smoke inhalation. His medic training took over as he laid her flat, checking her airway and positioning her head to maximize oxygen flow. "Stay with me," he urged, performing the proper maneuvers to help clear her lungs. "Come on, Romy, breathe." Bismarck stood guard, his ears swiveling to track any approaching threats while Calder worked. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Romy's breathing steadied and her eyes fluttered open. "That's it," Calder encouraged, relief flooding through him. "Nice and slow." Sirens wailed in the distance as smoke billowed from the storage facility. The evidence box lay beside them, its contents intact. The recorder and ledgers that could bring down Voss's operation had survived. Everything else in the unit would be ash, but they had the essential pieces. Romy's hand found his, squeezing weakly. "Your mom," she whispered hoarsely. "She saved us again. Those exit notes." Calder helped her sit up slowly, keeping one arm around her shoulders while Bismarck pressed against their legs, still alert for danger. The dog's training had proven invaluable once again, another piece of Marta's careful planning that had protected them when they needed it most. They watched as fire trucks screamed into the parking lot, their red lights painting the smoke-filled sky. The heat of the fire reached them even at this distance, and the crackling roar of flames consuming evidence made Calder's jaw clench. But they had survived, and they had what mattered most: proof of Voss's crimes and each other. Back at the veterinary clinic, the night pressed against the windows like a heavy blanket. Calder's hands trembled slightly as he placed the handheld recorder on his desk. Romy sat nearby, her face still bearing traces of soot from their escape. Bismarck lay at Calder's feet, amber eyes fixed on the device as if recognizing it. "You don't have to listen alone," Romy said softly, her voice still rough from the smoke. Calder nodded, unable to form words. His finger hovered over the play button for a long moment before he finally pressed it. The tape crackled. And then, "Calder?" His mother's voice filled the room, tired but determined. "My son, if you're hearing this, then I couldn't deliver this message in person, and Bismarck has done exactly what I trained him to do." The sound of her voice, so clear and present, made Calder's chest tighten. He gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. "First, you need to know the truth. I never abandoned you. Never. Leaving you was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was the only way to keep you safe." There was a pause, filled with the sound of papers shuffling. "I discovered something at work, evidence of what Trent Voss was really using our freight routes for. When I started asking questions, he made it clear what would happen to you if I didn't disappear." Calder closed his eyes, memories of that time flooding back. Being 13, waking up to find his mother gone, the years of anger and confusion that followed. "I couldn't tell you then. You were too young, and any contact would have put you at risk. So I watched from a distance, made sure you were safe with your Aunt Sarah. I saw you graduate high school, saw you join the army. Every achievement, every step you took. I was there, in the shadows, proud beyond words." A quiet sob escaped Romy. She reached over and placed her hand on Calder's shoulder, steadying him. 2 years ago, I finally gathered enough evidence to bring Voss down, but I needed someone I could trust completely to finish what I started. Someone with both the skills and the integrity to see it through. That's when I started training Bismarck." The German shepherd's ears perked up at his name, and he pressed closer to Calder's leg. "I chose him specifically for you, son. Trained him to respond to the whistle patterns I knew you'd recognize from your medic days. Every command, every response, it's all designed to help you complete what I couldn't. The evidence in the storage unit, combined with what's hidden in the places Bismarck knows about, it's enough to destroy Voss's operation completely." Calder's throat burned. All these years, he'd carried the weight of abandonment, built walls around his heart, while his mother had been sacrificing everything to protect him. The ledgers detail every shipment, every corrupt official on Voss's payroll. But be careful, he has people everywhere. Trust Ephraim Dodd. He tried to help me years ago before Voss forced him out of office. And Calder. Her voice softened. "I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. But please understand. Everything I did, every day I spent away from you, it was all to keep you safe." Tears ran freely down Calder's face now. Romy's hand remained steady on his shoulder, anchoring him as his mother's voice continued. "Bismarck will guide you to the rest of what you need. He's more than just a dog. He's my last gift to you, a way to finish this fight and maybe find a way to forgive me." There was a long pause. "I love you, son. I never stopped loving you. Be careful, be smart, and know that I'm proud of the man you've become." The recording clicked off, leaving the room in heavy silence. Calder sat motionless, tears falling onto his desk. Bismarck whined softly and placed his head in Calder's lap, those intelligent eyes full of understanding. "She protected you," Romy whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. "All this time she was protecting you." "I spent 20 years hating her," Calder said, his voice raw. "Convinced myself she just walked away, and she was out there alone, fighting this battle, training Bismarck." He reached down to stroke the shepherd's head. "Training him for me." Romy pulled her chair closer, keeping contact. "She knew exactly who to trust with this. She watched you grow up, saw the kind of man you became. That's why she chose you to finish this." Calder looked down at Bismarck, seeing him with new eyes. Every response, every trained behavior, it was all part of Marta's plan, her way of reaching across time to help him now. The dog wasn't just a messenger. He was a living bridge between mother and son. "We need to call Dodd," Calder said finally, straightening in his chair. The grief was still there, but it was transforming into something else. Purpose, determination. Mom's recording mentioned other evidence that Bismarck knows about. We need to move fast before Voss realizes how much we already have. Romy nodded, reaching for her phone. I'll call him now, but Calder... She waited until he met her eyes. Believing your mom means accepting everything she risked her life to protect. Are you ready for that? Calder looked at the recorder, then at Bismarck, who sat alert and ready beside him. 20 years of bitterness were cracking, falling away to reveal the truth underneath. A mother's love, a desperate fight for justice, and a chance to make it all mean something. Yes, he said firmly. I'm ready. We finish what she started. Romy dialed Dodd's number, and within minutes, they were outlining their next steps. The retired sheriff's voice was grave as they discussed the new revelations and the likelihood that Voss would escalate his attempts to stop them. Your mother was right about one thing, Dodd said over the speakerphone. Voss has people everywhere, but he doesn't have everyone. There's still good folks in the DA's office, ones who can't be bought. We just need to get the evidence to the right hands. And we will, Calder replied, his voice steady now. Mom spent 20 years building this case. We're not letting it burn like that storage unit. As they finalized their plans, Bismarck remained vigilant beside Calder, a constant reminder of Marta's foresight and love. The dog's presence felt different now. Not just a responsibility thrust upon him, but a gift, a final message from a mother who never truly left him. The night stretched on as they worked, but the darkness felt less oppressive now. In its place was a sense of purpose, of justice too long delayed but finally within reach. For the first time in 20 years, Calder felt truly connected to his mother, understanding at last the depth of her sacrifice and the strength of her love. Calder spread Marta's ledgers across his desk, squinting at the cramped notations. Coffee cups littered the surface, evidence of hours spent trying to crack his mother's code. Bismarck lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head when Calder sighed in frustration. These numbers can't be just dates and amounts, he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Mom was too smart for that. Romy leaned over his shoulder, pointing at a repeating pattern. Look here, these 3-digit groups. They show up next to specific routes, but they're not mileage or typical accounting codes. Calder's eyes narrowed. Something about those numbers tugged at his memory. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos until he found what he was looking for. A snapshot from his residency days at the rural clinic where his mother had worked part-time managing medical supplies. The inventory system, he said suddenly, sitting up straighter. Mom used to handle controlled substances there. These numbers, they match the format of the old narcotics tracking system. Romy's eyes widened. So these entries could be tracking actual shipments disguised as legitimate medical transport? Exactly. Calder's fingers traced the columns. She was documenting every suspicious delivery, every irregular pattern. But she needed proof beyond just numbers. He reached for the brass key they'd found in Bismarck's collar, turning it over in his hands. The worn metal caught the light, and suddenly the pieces clicked together. The safe, he breathed. The old clinic used these exact mechanisms for their narcotics cabinets. Mom must have... He trailed off, looking at Bismarck. The shepherd's ears perked up, sensing Calder's shift in energy. Calder stood, producing 2 sharp whistles. Bismarck immediately sat at attention, head cocked at a specific angle, the same position he'd taken multiple times when they were reviewing evidence. He's not just responding to sound, Calder realized. Mom trained him to orient toward something specific. He whistled again, watching as Bismarck's head turned precisely the same way. He's showing us a direction. the same angle as those old storage cabinets. Romy grabbed her jacket. The clinic's been closed for years, but the building's still standing. If your mom hid something there, we need to move fast, Calder agreed. He gathered the ledgers and called Dodd, quickly explaining their breakthrough. The drive to the old clinic took 20 minutes, each second weighted with possibility. The building stood dark and abandoned, its windows clouded with dust. Calder used his old service entrance code, relieved when the door clicked open. Inside, their flashlights carved paths through the gloom. Bismarck moved with purpose, leading them past empty exam rooms to the medication storage area. 2 short whistles from Calder, and the shepherd stopped precisely in front of a cabinet recessed into the wall. The brass key slid into the lock perfectly. Inside, behind a false panel Marta had carefully installed, they found a small waterproof case containing a hard drive. She knew this place inside and out, Calder said softly, handling the drive with care. Knew exactly where Voss would never think to look. Back at the clinic, they connected the drive to a secure computer. Files populated the screen, spreadsheets documenting years of transactions, routes disguised as medical supply runs, shell companies funneling money through legitimate-looking accounts. "This is everything," Romy whispered, scrolling through the data. "Your mom mapped their entire operation." Calder nodded grimly. "And now we need to get it to someone who can use it." He called Dodd again, who arrived within the hour. "I've got someone we can trust," the former sheriff said, settling into a chair. "Deputy Sarah Chen. She worked narcotics before Voss started buying influence. Been waiting for a chance to bring him down." They spent the next 2 hours creating an exact copy of the drive, documenting every file with timestamps and verification codes. Dodd called Chen, using a careful code they'd established years ago for sensitive cases. The deputy arrived dressed as a delivery driver, her unmarked car parked several blocks away. She reviewed the copy thoroughly, nodding in approval. "I'll take this straight to DA Marcus Wells," she said. "He's new, brought in from outside the county. Voss hasn't had time to get to him yet." "Be careful," Calder warned. "They've already tried burning us out once." Chen patted her concealed weapon. "I've got backup plans for my backup plans. This evidence will make it through." After she left, Calder turned to the original drive. "We need to secure this separately," he said. "Can't risk losing everything if something goes wrong with the copy." Romy suggested several hiding places, but Calder shook his head at each one. Finally, he turned to Bismarck, who sat watching them with those intelligent eyes. "Mom trusted you with her most important messages," he said softly, kneeling beside the shepherd. "Think you can help me protect this one too?" Working carefully, they created a new hidden compartment in Bismarck's thick leather collar, waterproofed and cushioned. The drive, barely larger than a stamp, fit perfectly. Calder secured it, then checked that the collar still sat comfortably. "No one would think to look there twice," Romy said, scratching Bismarck's ears. "Not after they've already found the key." Calder nodded, watching his mother's last gift settle into his new role as guardian. Every piece of her plan kept unfolding, revealing new layers of protection and foresight. "Now we wait," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "And we pray the DA moves faster than Voss's people." Bismarck pressed against his leg, a warm reminder of everything his mother had sacrificed to bring them to this moment. The truth was finally moving toward light, carried by trusted hands and protected by a dog who embodied his mother's love and determination. The late afternoon sun slanted through the clinic windows, painting warm stripes across the worn tile floor. Calder leaned against his desk, allowing himself a moment of cautious hope. They had done everything right, secured the evidence, made clean copies, chosen trustworthy allies. For the first time since finding Bismarck's caller message, he felt like he could breathe. "The DA should have the drive by now," Romy said, organizing patient files for the next day. Deputy Chen seemed confident. Calder nodded, watching Bismarck doze in a patch of sunlight. "Mom mapped every route, every shell company. Once Wells sees those records..." He let himself imagine Voss in handcuffs, justice for his mother finally within reach. The clinic phone rang, shattering the peaceful moment. Calder picked up, expecting a routine call about vaccinations or checkups. "Dr. Wynn?" The voice was unfamiliar, tense. "This is Officer Martinez. There's been an incident. Deputy Chen never made it to the DA's office. Her car was found empty an hour ago." The hope Calder had been nurturing crumbled. "Was there any sign of..." "The evidence package is gone. We're treating this as a coordinated interception." After hanging up, Calder shared the news with Romy. Her face paled. Someone knew the route, the timing. "Inside knowledge," Calder agreed grimly. He thought of Sable's insistence on getting the caller, her convenient appearance as next of kin. The pieces clicked. "She's Voss's bookkeeper. Has to be. That's how she knew about Mom's evidence." Romy glanced at her watch. "I need to make a supply run before dark. We're almost out of basic medications, and we have that surgery scheduled. First thing tomorrow." "Be careful," Calder said. "If they're moving against us, I'll take the back roads. Stay aware." She grabbed her keys, giving Bismarck a quick pat as she passed. "Start thinking about our next move. We can't let them bury this." Calder focused on closing procedures, trying to push down his growing unease. An hour passed. Then 2. Romy wasn't answering her phone. The sky had darkened to deep purple when Calder did his final walkthrough. Something caught his eye behind the clinic, a flash of red in his flashlight beam. His heart stopped. Romy's car keys lay in the gravel, next to Bismarck's severed leash. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Original drive for their lives. 2 hours. Instructions to follow." The message included a photo. Romy and Bismarck, in what looked like a storage room, both alive but clearly confined. Romy's expression was fierce despite her obvious fear. Bismarck sat alert beside her, watching the camera with those intelligent eyes that had guided them to so much truth. Calder's hands shook as he locked the clinic doors. His mother's careful plans, her chosen messenger, the woman who'd stood by him through all of it. Now they were bargaining chips in Voss's game. The drive tucked safely in Bismarck's collar might finally bring down a criminal empire, but only if he could find a way to protect both the evidence and the lives at stake. He gathered Marta's training journals, spreading them across his desk. There had to be something. A detail about Bismarck's abilities, a backup plan she'd encoded in her meticulous notes. His mother had thought through every contingency. She wouldn't have left him without options. "I won't let them win," he whispered, paging through the journals with desperate focus. "I won't let them take everything you fought for." The wall clock ticked away precious minutes as Calder searched for answers, haunted by the photo of Romy and Bismarck, waiting in some unknown place, counting on him to find a way through this impossible choice. His mother's voice seemed to echo in his mind. "Trust the dog. Trust the training. Trust yourself to finish what she started." He wouldn't surrender the drive, couldn't betray everything his mother had sacrificed. But he also couldn't abandon Romy and Bismarck to Voss's retribution. The answer had to be in these pages, in the careful plans of a woman who'd given up everything to protect both her son and the truth. Calder turned another page, his determination hardening into resolve. He would find a way to save them all, the evidence, his friends, and the justice his mother had died pursuing. The game wasn't over yet. The next message would come soon, demanding an answer. Calder kept reading, racing against time and the growing certainty that whatever move he made next would determine not just his own fate, but the lives of everyone he'd come to care about most. Calder's fingers trembled as he spread Marta's journals across his desk. The ticking of the wall clock echoed through the empty clinic, each second stealing precious time from Romy and Bismarck. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to think like the army medic he'd been. Methodical, focused, controlled. The journals were a maze of his mother's precise handwriting. Route maps, shipping schedules, and cryptic notes filled every page. Calder flipped through them desperately until a phrase caught his eye. Twin span verification. Third Tuesday pattern holds. He grabbed the next journal, then another. The words twin span appeared repeatedly, always linked to timing notes and rough sketches of track layouts. The old twin span rail yard. He remembered it from his childhood, when freight still rolled through Pine Trace regularly. 2 parallel bridges crossed the river there, hence the name. Calder pulled out his phone and began photographing pages, zooming in on details. The pattern slowly emerged. Voss used the abandoned rail yard as a transfer point, timing illegal shipments to coincide with legitimate livestock transports. The regular cattle trucks provided cover for the real business happening in the shadows. His mother's notes were meticulous. She'd mapped loading zones, noted blind spots, even sketched the old control tower that still loomed over the yard. Several entries mentioned high ground advantage and clear sightlines from North Tower. The phone buzzed, Ephraim Dodd returning his earlier panic call. "I've got something," Calder said without preamble. "The twin-span rail yard. It's Voss's staging ground for transfers. Mom mapped it all." "Makes sense," Dodd replied, his voice grave. "Remote location, easy access to county lines, and those old service roads let them move product without hitting main streets. I think that's where they're holding Romy and Bismarck. The timing fits their patterns." "You're probably right." Dodd paused. "Listen, son. I've put the word out to some trusted contacts to slow walk any warrant requests for the next 24 hours. We don't want official action spooking Voss before you can get them out." Calder's grip tightened on the phone. "You're saying don't make the trade." "I'm saying we both know Voss won't let them live after he gets that drive. Your mother's evidence is too damaging. Once he has it, there's no reason to keep witnesses around." The truth of it hit Calder like a physical blow. Trading the drive wouldn't save Romy and Bismarck. It would only ensure their deaths while destroying everything his mother had sacrificed to expose. "I need to force this on my terms," Calder said slowly. "Use Mom's intel to get them out while keeping the evidence secure." "It's risky," Dodd warned, "but it's their best chance. What's your play?" Calder studied the rail yard sketches. "Mom noted all the access points, sight lines, patrol patterns. She was thorough. Give me an hour to work up a plan, then meet me at the clinic. I'll need backup I can trust." After ending the call, Calder dove back into the journals with renewed purpose. He grabbed paper and began mapping key points. The control tower's commanding view, blind approaches noted in Marta's shorthand, timing of guard changes she'd observed. His mother had been building this case for years, learning every detail of Voss's operation. Now her careful work would help save the 2 beings she'd entrusted to his care. Calder went to his truck and retrieved his old climbing rope from his army days. He checked it carefully. The braided nylon was still strong. The knots still muscle memory familiar. The height of the control tower was daunting, but the rope would give him options. Back inside, he spread out the most detailed rail yard schematics. The tower stood like a sentinel over the yard's north end. Multiple stairwells provided access, but Marta had marked one as minimal coverage in her notes. That would be his way in. He thought of Romy's fierce expression in the photo, of Bismarck's steady gaze. They were counting on him. His mother had counted on him too, training Bismarck as a living bridge between them, trusting Calder would ultimately understand and finish what she'd started. The next hour passed in focused preparation. Calder memorized approaches, measured rope lengths, calculated timing. This wasn't a panicked hostage trade. It was a controlled operation with a clear objective: extract his people while preserving the evidence that could bring down Voss's empire. When Dodd arrived, Calder was ready. He laid out the plan, pointing to key positions on the schematics. "It's dangerous," Dodd said finally, "but it's solid. Your mother's intel gives us the advantage of knowing the ground. Voss won't expect us to move first." Calder nodded, checking his rope one final time. "They think I'm desperate, that I'll take any deal to save them. But Mom taught me something through all this. Sometimes the best way to protect people is to stand and fight." "She'd be proud of you, son." Dodd's weathered face was solemn. "Not just for finding the truth, but for seeing it through." "I didn't understand before," Calder said quietly, "why she left, what she was fighting for. But I do now, and I won't let Voss destroy everything she sacrificed to build." He rolled up the schematics, tucking them securely away with his rope and other gear. The wall clock showed nearly midnight. Soon Voss would send instructions, expecting a broken man ready to surrender the evidence to save his friends. Instead, Calder would meet him at Twinspan on very different terms. The rail yard's shadowy passages and towering overlooks would become the stage for a confrontation years in the making. Mother and son united at last in purpose, if not in presence. "Let's move," Calder said, leading the way out of the clinic. "We've got people counting on us." The old rail yard loomed against the midnight sky, a maze of rusted metal and long shadows. Calder's boots crunched softly on gravel as he approached Twinspan's main gate. The decoy bag hung from his shoulder, while the real drive pressed against his chest in an inner pocket. Every step felt weighted with purpose. Above him, metal catwalks creaked and swayed in the autumn wind. The sound carried across the empty yard like whispered warnings. Freight cars stood silent on the tracks, their bulk creating corridors of darkness perfect for an ambush. Calder moved deliberately, making just enough noise to be noticed. The beam of his flashlight swept visible arcs, a calculated show of arrival. In his earpiece, Dodd's voice came through steady and low. "I've got eyes on the north and east approaches. No movement yet, but stay sharp." "Copy that," Calder whispered. "Hold position until I confirm they're both alive." He passed between two idle boxcars, emerging into a wider loading area. The control tower rose before him like a steel giant, its windows dark except for one faint light near the top. Marta's diagrams had shown every angle, every blind spot. Now her careful notes would help him save the people who mattered most. A metallic clang echoed from above. Calder's light found movement on the middle catwalk, first Sable's slim figure, then Voss's broader frame. The freight magnate's pistol gleamed dully in the weak light. "That's far enough, Doctor," Voss called down. His voice carried the gravelly authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Show us what you brought." Calder raised the decoy bag slowly. "Where are they?" "Insurance first," Voss gestured with the gun. "Open it." "Not until I see them both breathing." A tense pause followed. Then Voss nodded to someone in the shadows. Romy stumbled into view, her hands bound behind her. Even from below, Calder could see the fury in her stance. She was scared but unbroken. A sharp tug on a chain brought Bismarck forward. The German shepherd wore a tight muzzle, but his eyes locked onto Calder instantly. The dog's muscles trembled with the effort of restraint. Satisfied? Voss asked. Now open the bag. Calder unzipped it carefully, angling the contents towards the light. You can see it's here, but I'm not throwing it up. Too easy for accidents at this height. Then bring it up. Voss indicated the rusty maintenance ladder. Slowly. This was the delicate part. Calder needed to keep Voss's attention on him while maneuvering everyone into position. The structural weaknesses Marta had documented were useless unless he could separate the hostages from their captors. He gripped the ladder's cold rungs and began climbing. Each step brought him closer to the confrontation his mother had prepared him for, though she'd never lived to see it. The wind pulled at his jacket, making the catwalk sway slightly. Stop there, Voss ordered when Calder reached their level. Slide the bag over. Release them first. You're not in a position to make demands. Voss's small eyes narrowed. The evidence, or they both go over the side. Calder noted Sable's stance, slightly too close to the railing his mother had marked as compromised. She was watching him intently, missing the subtle signs of metal fatigue beneath her feet. The thing is, Calder said carefully, I don't think you will. Dead hostages can't help you explain away what's on this drive, and there are copies already moving through channels you can't reach. Copies can be discredited. Voss stepped forward. Original hardware carries weight that digital files don't. You know that, or you wouldn't be here. The wind gusted harder, making the catwalk groan. Romy shifted her weight, sensing the structure's weakness. Her eyes met Calder's briefly. She understood something was coming. Last chance, Voss growled. The drive, or watch them fall. Calder's hand moved towards the bag, every motion measured. He needed Voss focused completely on that movement, on the promise of victory. The real drive sat secure against his chest, while overhead, the night sky held its breath. The catwalk swayed again, metal singing with tension. Bismarck's ears pricked forward, catching a whistle pattern too faint for human ears, a signal Marta had trained him to recognize. The dog's muscles bunched, ready. Everything Calder had learned about his mother, every detail she'd left to guide him, had led to this moment on these wind-swept catwalks. The truth about her sacrifice, preserved in Bismarck's training and coded in her careful notes, would finally serve its purpose. He took one more step, keeping Voss's attention locked on the decoy bag while the real evidence remained hidden. The game of leverage wasn't over. It was about to begin in earnest. Time slowed to heartbeats. Voss took another step forward, his attention fixed on the decoy bag. The metal beneath their feet groaned with each shift in weight. Calder's fingers found the whistle pattern Marta had documented so carefully. 2 distinct tones that would trigger Bismarck's protective response. He drew a slow breath, then let the signal pierce the night air. The effect was instantaneous. Bismarck exploded into motion, a blur of focused power. The German shepherd's training took over as he lunged forward, breaking free of his loose restraint. His shoulder slammed into Voss's wrist with precision, sending the pistol spinning across the catwalk's surface. The impact of dog against man sent vibrations through the already weakened structure. With a terrible screech of metal giving way, a section of the corroded catwalk began to shear apart. Romy, still bound, lost her footing as the platform tilted sharply. "Hold on!" Calder shouted. In one fluid motion, he secured his climbing rope to the nearest solid beam, muscles remembering every emergency field procedure from his medic days. There was no time to second guess. Romy was sliding toward the edge. He dove forward just as she slipped over the side. His shoulder screamed in protest as he caught her full weight, the rope jerking taut against his harness. They dangled 40 feet above the rail yard, spinning slowly in the wind. "I've got you," he grunted, trying to stabilize them both. Romy's bound hands made it harder for her to grip him, but her eyes held steady trust despite their precarious position. Above them, Bismarck moved with calculated precision along the latticed framework. The dog positioned himself strategically between Sable and the dangling pair, exactly as Marta had trained him to guard vulnerable targets. His low growl carried clear warning. "Sheriff's Department, everyone freeze!" Dodd's amplified voice boomed across the yard. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as deputies converged on the scene from multiple angles. Calder braced his feet against the tower's support struts, drawing on every ounce of strength to haul Romy upward. The rope creaked with their combined weight. Each inch gained felt like a mile, but he refused to let go. Voss scrambled across the tilted catwalk toward his fallen weapon. But Bismarck was faster. The shepherd's training kicked in once more as he launched forward, positioning his body to block access to the gun. His teeth flashed in the dim light, keeping Voss pinned in place until deputies could reach the catwalk. "Don't move!" Multiple weapons trained on Voss and Sable as law enforcement secured the scene. Calder focused on getting Romy safely onto stable footing, his arms shaking from the strain. "You okay?" he asked softly as he cut through her restraints. Romy nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Thanks to you. And Bismarck?" She reached out to scratch the shepherd's ears as he padded over to check on them, his mission accomplished. Deputies efficiently took control, securing both Voss and Sable, while evidence teams began documenting the scene. The reel drive still rested securely against Calder's chest, proof of everything his mother had worked to expose. Bismarck pressed against Calder's leg, alert but calmer now that the danger had passed. In that moment, watching officers lead Voss away, Calder felt the full weight of what his mother had entrusted to him. Through Bismarck's training and her careful planning, she'd given him the tools to finish what she'd started. More than that, she'd given him back the truth about her love, her sacrifice, and the courage that had driven her to protect both justice and her son. The German shepherd's ears perked forward, catching some distant sound as the night settled into the rhythms of procedural law enforcement. His training had served its purpose, just as Marta had intended. Together, they had brought her mission to its end. In the aftermath of the rail yard confrontation, the industrial floodlights cast harsh shadows across the scene as law enforcement methodically processed the area. Sheriff Dodd stood at a folding table they'd set up, his weathered hands carefully arranging the evidence that would finally bring down Trent Voss's operation. "Let's get this organized properly," Dodd said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in law enforcement. He laid out the ledgers, drive, and files in precise chronological order. "Every piece needs to connect seamlessly." Calder watched as Dodd matched shipping dates from the ledgers to the digital records on the drive, creating an unbroken chain of evidence. Bismarck, now free of his muzzle, lay quietly at Calder's feet, his mission completed just as Marta had trained him. "Your mother's documentation is meticulous," Dodd noted, examining Marta's recorder. "She time-stamped everything, cross-referenced her observations. The DA's going to have a solid foundation here." The district attorney's office sent 2 senior prosecutors to receive the evidence personally. They worked with Dodd to catalog each item, placing everything in tagged evidence bags. The recorder drew particular attention, Marta's voice providing crucial context for the paper trail she'd uncovered. "The timeline she established is bulletproof," one prosecutor commented, reviewing the transcription. "She documented every meeting, every suspicious shipment. The motive for her investigation is clear throughout the recordings." Calder stepped forward when it was time to give his statement. He kept his words precise and focused, exactly as his mother's notes had outlined for maximum legal impact. "I can confirm the chain of custody for these materials," he stated clearly. "From their discovery to this handoff, every step has been documented and witnessed. Outside the evidence processing area, They could hear reporters gathering, their cameras flashing as Voss was led to a waiting police vehicle. The freight magnate's carefully maintained facade had crumbled, replaced by barely contained rage as officers secured his handcuffs. Sable Keene was next, her designer clothes incongruous with the steel restraints. Her face was a mask of cold fury as deputies read her charges: conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The evidence she'd tried to destroy had survived, protected by the very family member she'd betrayed. Gideon Rusk arrived in a separate patrol car, already in custody after officers tracked him down. The arson charges would stick. Fire investigators had found clear evidence of accelerants at the storage facility. His attempt to destroy Marta's documentation had backfired, quite literally. "We've got them dead to rights," Dodd said quietly to Calder. "Your mother built this case like a master craftsman. Every document backs up another. Every recording validates a ledger entry. There's no wiggle room for their lawyers." The district attorney's team finished processing the last of the evidence, sealing the final bags with tamper-evident tape. They'd handle the press statements, the legal proceedings, all the machinery of justice that would grind forward from this point. That part wasn't Calder's concern anymore. He looked down at Bismarck, who remained alert but relaxed, watching the proceedings with intelligent eyes. The German, Shepard had performed exactly as Marta had trained him, protecting, guiding, and ultimately helping to deliver her evidence into the right hands. Romy appeared at his side, her wrists still showing faint marks from her restraints. "Your mom would be proud," she said softly. "She trusted you to finish this, and you did." Calder nodded, his throat tight. The press might be clamoring for statements, cameras might be flashing, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that Marta's work, her sacrifice, her carefully preserved evidence, it would all serve justice now. His mother's voice on that recorder would help put Voss and his conspirators away for a very long time. Bismarck's tail thumped against the ground as Calder reached down to scratch his ears. The dog had been Marta's final gift, not just a trained assistant, but a living connection between mother and son. As the last evidence bags were sealed and logged, Calder felt a sense of completion. His mother's mission was fulfilled, her truth preserved and protected, just as she'd planned. The evening settled softly around Calder's farmhouse porch, painting the sky in gentle strokes of purple and gold. Bismarck lay stretched across the weathered boards, his head resting on Calder's knee. Romy sat close by in the old rocking chair, her presence steady and warm, like the last rays of sunlight. With careful fingers, Calder opened the final envelope he'd found tucked in Marta's journals. The paper was soft from age, but her handwriting remained clear and determined. "My dearest Calder, if you're reading this, it means Bismarck has done what I trained him to do. He's brought you to the truth. Leaving you was the hardest choice I've ever made. Every birthday I missed, every Christmas without you, carved deeper wounds in my heart. But when Voss threatened your life, I knew I had to disappear to keep you safe. I've spent these years gathering evidence, building a case that could stop him for good, and I've spent them training Bismarck, not just as a courier, but as the bridge I hoped would connect us again. He has your strength, your loyalty. Trust him as I've trusted you to finish what I started. I know you've carried anger, thinking I abandoned you. I pray that understanding why I left helps heal that wound. Everything I did was to protect you, my boy. You were always loved, always in my thoughts, always the reason I kept fighting. With all my love, Mom." Calder's vision blurred as he folded the letter. Bismarck whined softly and pressed closer, offering comfort just as Marta had trained him to do. For the first time since the pup arrived, its crying completely stopped, as if it knew its mission was finally complete. The anger that had lived in Calder's chest for so many years dissolved, replaced by a profound understanding of his mother's sacrifice. She hadn't abandoned him. She'd given up everything to keep him safe. The distance between them had been born of love, not rejection. Romy's hand. Romy's found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. She'd stood beside him through all of this, her strength unwavering even in the face of danger. The thought of her leaving now felt impossible. "Stay," he said quietly, turning to meet her warm brown eyes. "Not just at the clinic. With me. With us." He gestured to include Bismarck, who perked up his ears at being included. Romy's smile was soft but certain. "After everything we've been through, try getting rid of me." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, someone needs to help you keep this guy in line." She reached over to ruffle Bismarck's fur. The German shepherd's tail thumped against the porch boards, and Calder felt the rightness of it all settle into place. His mother's final gift wasn't just the evidence or even Bismarck. It was this chance to rebuild, to understand, to love again. Inside his home office, Calder carefully arranged Marta's journals on the sturdy oak shelf next to where Bismarck's leash hung. His fingers lingered on the worn leather covers, each one holding pieces of his mother's journey. The brass lock clicked softly as he secured them, not hidden anymore, but preserved with the respect they deserved. The morning sunlight streamed through the window as he picked up his phone to call Ephraim Dodd. The old sheriff had become more than an ally through all of this. He was family now. "Bismarck's doing great with the advanced commands," Calder reported, watching the German shepherd doze in the patch of sunshine by his desk. "Those whistle patterns Mom designed, they're incredible. He responds better every day." "Marta always did think 10 steps ahead," Dodd replied warmly. "That dog's going to be quite something when you're done with his training." After hanging up, Calder picked up the handheld recorder, Marta's voice captured in time, and placed it in the desk drawer. He didn't need to replay her messages anymore. Her words lived in his heart now, understood and accepted. The familiar sounds of the clinic starting its day drifted through the walls. Romy's cheerful greeting to their first patient, the gentle scratch of paws on the waiting room floor. But everything felt different now. Lighter somehow. The weight of old hurt had lifted, replaced by purpose and peace. Bismarck trotted beside him as they headed to the front desk. The new collar in Calder's pocket had arrived that morning, simple black leather with a silver tag. He'd thought carefully about what to engrave on it, finally settling on 2 words that said everything. Promise kept. As he fastened it around Bismarck's neck, the pup sat perfectly still, amber eyes fixed on Calder with that remarkable intelligence Marta had nurtured. The old collar, the one that had started this whole journey, now rested with the journals, its mission complete. Romy looked up from her paperwork, her smile warming as she watched them. There was no need for grand gestures or declarations between them anymore. They had built something, real in the crucible of truth and danger, a partnership forged in trust and tested by fire. The day unfolded like any other. Routine checks, vaccinations, worried pet owners seeking reassurance. But every moment felt fresh, purposeful. Bismarck moved between them with quiet confidence, greeting patients, offering comfort where needed, exactly as Marta had trained him to do. This was their life now, ordinary in its rhythms, but extraordinary in its foundation. Every day they worked together honored Marta's courage and sacrifice. Her legacy lived on not in dramatic moments, but in these simple, intentional choices to move forward with truth and compassion as their guide. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.